15,000 against 300,000. Those aren't battle odds, those are extinction mathematics. Those are the numbers that appear in history textbooks right before entire civilizations get erased from existence and replaced with something completely different. But in the summer of 1683, something impossible happened in Vienna that changed the trajectory of human civilization. And here's what will shock you. If Vienna had fallen that summer, you probably wouldn't be reading this in English right now. Islam would have swept across Europe. Christianity would have become a minority religion confined to scattered enclaves, and the entire cultural, scientific, and political development of the Western world would have taken a completely different path. Picture this: the Ottoman Empire at its maximum territorial extent, stretching from the Persian Gulf to the gates of Vienna, from the shores of North Africa to the Caucasus Mountains. 300,000 soldiers, the largest army assembled in the 17th century, marching toward a single medieval city, defended by a garrison that could barely fill a modern sports stadium. The Ottomans had the best artillery in the world, the most feared infantry, the Janissaries, cavalry that had crushed every European army they'd faced, and a commander so confident of victory he'd already sent word to the Sultan, promising Vienna would fall within weeks. Vienna had crumbling medieval walls, a starving population, and a 70-year-old commander with a shoulder wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. The mathematics of annihilation were brutally simple. But what happened over the next 60 days would prove that mathematics alone doesn't determine destiny. To understand why the Ottomans came to Vienna with such overwhelming force, we need to go back 154 years to an unfinished dream that haunted Ottoman pride like a phantom wound. In 1529, Suleiman the Magnificent had brought a massive army to these same walls and been forced to retreat by autumn weather, disease, and stubborn Habsburg defenders. For the Ottoman Empire, that retreat was more than a military setback. It was a psychological scar, an unfulfilled destiny, the one prize that had escaped the grasp of their greatest sultan. For over a century and a half, Vienna remained the symbol of Ottoman failure, the city that refused to submit, the gateway to Europe that remained locked. Every subsequent sultan looked at maps showing their vast empire and saw that one gap: the failure to push beyond Vienna into the heart of Christian Europe. By the 1680s, the Ottoman Empire was still immensely powerful, but cracks were beginning to show. Their military technology was stagnating while European armies were innovating. Their economy struggled under the weight of endless warfare. And Christian Europe, though divided, was beginning to see the Ottomans as potentially beatable. This was the moment for one final massive push, to finish what Suleiman had started, to restore Ottoman pride, and to prove that Islamic expansion into Europe was destiny, not history. In Istanbul, Sultan Mehmed IV, more interested in hunting than governing, found the perfect instrument for this ambition in his Grand Vizier, Kara Mustafa Pasha. Kara Mustafa was everything Mehmed was not: disciplined, strategic, consumed by visions of military glory. He had risen through Ottoman ranks through competence and ruthlessness, and he saw Vienna as his chance to achieve immortal fame. He would be the man who succeeded where even Suleiman had failed. He would open the road to Europe and be remembered for centuries as the conqueror who changed the world. Can you imagine that level of ambition? That certainty of destiny? Kara Mustafa presented his plan to the Sultan with absolute confidence. "Give me the army," he said, "and I will deliver Vienna to you within one campaign season. And after Vienna falls, all of Germany lies open. After Germany, France. After France, nothing stands between the Ottoman Crescent and the Atlantic Ocean." The Sultan, seduced by this vision of restored glory, gave his blessing. And so began one of the most massive military mobilizations in 17th century history. Throughout the winter and spring of 1683, the Ottoman Empire gathered its strength. From every province, soldiers converged on Istanbul and the staging areas beyond. 60,000 Janissaries, those legendary elite infantry trained from childhood to know only warfare and loyalty to the Sultan, assembled in their distinctive white uniforms and tall caps. 80,000 Sipahi cavalry, the heavily armored horsemen who formed the backbone of Ottoman military power, gathered their weapons and war horses. Crimean Tatars, feared across Eastern Europe as raiders of exceptional cruelty and skill, rode south to join the host, bringing their traditional steppe warfare tactics. Engineers, sappers, miners, artillery specialists, all the technical experts who had made Ottoman siege warfare so effective, assembled with their tools and equipment. Behind the fighting men came the logistical tail that made Ottoman campaigns possible. Thousands of support staff, camp followers, merchants, surgeons, cooks, and laborers. When this host finally began its march westward through the Balkans in spring 1683, it stretched for miles. A moving city of nearly 300,000 souls, advancing like a human tidal wave toward Vienna. The column included hundreds of massive siege cannons, some so large they required dozens of oxen to move. Supply wagons carried mountains of grain, gunpowder, and ammunition. The march itself was a statement of overwhelming power, meant to break enemy morale before the first shot was fired. As the Ottoman army moved through Ottoman-controlled territories, local populations were forced to provide supplies and support. As they crossed into Habsburg lands, they burned everything they couldn't use, creating a wasteland that would make any Christian relief effort more difficult. Villages were emptied, their populations fleeing west with tales of the approaching apocalypse. Across Christian Europe, the reaction was terror mixed with fatalistic resignation. The Holy Roman Empire was deeply fragmented. Dozens of princes, bishops, and free cities, all technically under Emperor Leopold III's authority, but in practice following their own interests. France, under Louis XIV, was actually in conflict with the Habsburgs and showed no interest in helping Vienna. Protestant states viewed Catholic Vienna's problems with barely concealed satisfaction. It seemed entirely possible that Vienna would face the Ottoman host alone and be destroyed. Emperor Leopold I, watching the Ottoman advance from Vienna, made a decision that would haunt his reputation forever. He fled. Taking the imperial court, the treasury, and his family, Leopold abandoned Vienna and rode west to Linz, leaving the city's defense to whoever was brave or foolish enough to stay behind. That man was Count Ernst Rüdiger von Starhemberg, a 70-year-old veteran who had spent 50 years fighting in Habsburg wars across Europe. His body was a catalog of old wounds, scars from sword cuts, a limp from a musket ball that had shattered his leg decades earlier, fingers that no longer fully straightened from breaks that had healed poorly. He should have been retired, enjoying a comfortable old age on his estates. Instead, he stood on Vienna's walls and accepted command of an impossible defense with only 15,000 troops, a mix of professional soldiers, local militia, student volunteers, and armed citizens. The odds were 20-1. The city's fortifications were outdated, designed for an era before modern artillery. Food supplies were adequate for a short siege, but would run out quickly if the Ottomans settled in for a long campaign. Starhemberg knew all of this. He also knew that if Vienna fell, the road to the rest of Europe lay open. So he made his decision with clear eyes. Vienna would stand or he would die on its walls. There would be no surrender, no negotiation, no retreat. He sealed the city gates. Anyone still inside was now committed to seeing this through to victory or death. The citizens of Vienna understood what was coming. Churches overflowed with people seeking absolution, preparing their souls for death. Merchants buried their valuables, hoping someone might dig them up after the siege. Families said quiet goodbyes, acknowledging that many would not survive the coming weeks. And then the entire city transformed itself into a fortress. Every able-bodied man was assigned to a defensive sector. Women and elderly men prepared ammunition, carried supplies, and organized field hospitals. Children became runners, carrying messages between command posts under fire. Houses near the walls were demolished to clear fields of fire and provide building materials for strengthening defenses. Earth was dug from gardens and piled behind walls to absorb artillery impacts. Every blacksmith in the city worked around the clock, making pikes, repairing muskets, forging cannonballs. Brewers and bakers were organized into centralized food distribution to manage dwindling supplies. Church bells, those sacred voices that marked the rhythm of medieval life, were taken down from towers and melted, their bronze recast into cannon barrels and ammunition. On July 14, 1683, the horizon went dark. not with storm clouds, but with an army so vast it seemed to blacken the very earth. The Ottoman host had arrived. From Vienna's walls, defenders watched in horror as the plains surrounding the city transformed into a sea of white tents stretching to the horizon in every direction. Tens of thousands of campfires created an artificial constellation on the ground. War drums began their rhythm, deep, resonant, designed to be felt in the chest, to invade the mind, to break will before breaking bodies. At the center of this massive encampment rose Kara Mustafa's command pavilion, a structure of green silk and gold thread larger than most noble houses, surrounded by the tents of his officers and the elite Janissary units. That first night, Vienna's defenders stood on the walls and stared at what they faced. The campfires stretched as far as the eye could see. The sound of the Ottoman army, thousands of voices, animals, equipment, was like standing next to the ocean, an endless noise that never stopped. Some defenders wept, others prayed, many simply stood in silence, processing the mathematical reality that they were about to face 20 times their own numbers. Starhemberg walked the walls that night, stopping at each defensive position to speak with his men. He didn't give inspiring speeches or make impossible promises. He simply told them the truth. We cannot win this battle, but we can refuse to lose it. Every day we hold is a day for help to arrive. Every hour we survive is an hour Europe survives. Do not fight for victory. Fight for one more dawn. The bombardment began on July 17th. The first cannon shot struck Vienna's outer wall with a sound like the world cracking in half. Stone fragments exploded outward, killing 2 defenders instantly. Then came the second shot, and the third. And then dozens more as Ottoman artillery crews established their rhythm, a continuous thunder that would barely stop for the next 2 months. The psychological impact of constant bombardment is difficult for modern people to understand. Imagine living under artillery fire 24 hours a day for weeks. Every moment, death could arrive without warning. A cannonball punching through a wall, a ceiling collapsing, shrapnel tearing through flesh. Sleep became impossible. Nerves frayed. Men developed uncontrollable twitches. Some went mad, screaming until they had to be restrained. But Vienna's citizens adapted because they had no choice. They learned to recognize different cannon sounds, the deep boom of long-range guns, the sharper crack of smaller pieces, the particular whistle that meant incoming shot. They learned to keep moving, to never stand in obvious places, to sleep in cellars when possible. Life continued between explosions because stopping meant surrendering, and Vienna would not surrender. Kara Mustafa watched from his pavilion, confident that the bombardment alone would break Vienna's will. He didn't want to storm the walls. Assaults were costly, and he wanted to preserve the city as an intact prize for the Sultan. His strategy was to use artillery and mining to create terror, to make surrender seem preferable to continued suffering.